Hello, I'm Dr. Robert Hale. There is a piece of advice almost everyone gets when they mention cold feet or swollen ankles or that heavy feeling in the legs at the end of the day. Walk more. And I want to say clearly, right at the start, that advice is not wrong. I am not going to ask you to stop walking. Walking is one of the best things you do. But there is something walking does not do, something specific. One particular muscle that almost nobody mentions, and it is the muscle that decides whether blood makes it from your feet back up to your heart. When that muscle isn't doing its job, you can walk as far as you like and still not solve the problem. So let me take a few minutes to explain this the way I wish every patient over 60 understood it. Over my years in practice, I saw the same thing again and again, and it always struck me. These were people who had done everything they'd been told. They walked every morning. They put their feet up in the evening. They drank their water. Some of them wore compression stockings. And they still sat across from me with cold feet, ankles swollen by 4 in the afternoon, and that leaden feeling in the legs by dinner time. They weren't lazy. They hadn't given up. They were simply missing one piece that nobody had sat down and explained to them. Before we go further, let me be plain about why this is worth your attention, without frightening you, because fear helps nobody. When circulation through the legs isn't what it should be, the skin of the feet and ankles gets less oxygen than it needs, and skin with a poor blood supply heals slowly. A small scrape, a blister from a new shoe, a nick while trimming a toenail. Things that would heal in days on a younger leg can take weeks, and occasionally they don't heal at all without help. That is not said to alarm you. It's said because it is the practical reason foot care matters more after 60 than it did before. There's a second reason. Circulation trouble in the legs is often one of the earliest visible signs that the arteries elsewhere, including the ones feeding your heart, are under strain. Narrowed arteries in the legs have a name: peripheral artery disease. It is common in older adults, and many people who have it don't know. Now, here's something I want to clear up before we go any further, because almost every video on this subject blurs it together, and they are genuinely two different problems. The first is a vein problem. The veins carry blood back up toward the heart. When they don't do it well, blood pools. What you feel is swelling around the ankles that's worse by evening, a heavy aching, veins that stand out, skin changes low on the leg, and it usually improves when you put your feet up. The second is an artery problem. The arteries carry blood down into the leg. When they're narrowed, the leg doesn't get enough supply. What you feel is different. A cramping pain in the calf that comes on when you walk and goes away when you stop. Cold feet, pale skin, poor hair growth on the legs, and notably, putting your feet up makes it worse, not better. Why does the difference matter? Because the exercises I'm about to give you are aimed squarely at the vein side. They help the artery side too, but through a different route and more slowly. And if it's the artery side, there are things your doctor should be doing that no exercise replaces. There's a simple test for it, called an ankle brachial index. It takes a few minutes and it doesn't hurt. If the description of the artery side sounds like you, cramping in the calf when you walk that eases when you stand still, ask your doctor about it. One more thing on that, and it matters. If you have significant artery narrowing, compression stockings can be the wrong thing. They are excellent for many vein problems, and unhelpful or worse for some artery problems. So please don't put yourself in compression stockings on your own. Ask, so why isn't walking enough? The answer sits in something most of us have never given a moment's thought to: your calf. I know that sounds too simple, but let me explain why heart and vascular specialists call the calf the second heart. That isn't a figure of speech, it's an accurate description of what it does. Deep inside your lower leg, running between the calf muscles, are veins carrying blood upward, against gravity, all day long. Every time your calf muscle contracts, it squeezes those veins and pushes the blood up. And inside those veins there are small valves that work like one-way doors. They open as blood moves up and close right behind it, so it can't fall back down. Contract, push up, relax, valve closes. Blood holds its new position. That is the pump. That is the second heart. After about 50 or 60, two things happen. The vein walls become less elastic and stretch a little. Those small valves start to leak. They don't quite close anymore. And the calf muscle itself loses strength, particularly in people who spend a great deal of the day sitting. And who among us doesn't sit? Sitting in front of the television, sitting at the table, sitting in the car, sitting in the waiting room for your name to be called, sitting with the newspaper in the morning. Every hour spent sitting still, that calf pump is essentially switched off. Blood begins to pool in the ankles and feet. The result is what you already know: heavy legs, swollen ankles, less oxygen reaching the skin, tingling. That feeling at the end of the day that your legs weigh more than they did that morning. And here is the part that concerns me most. The less you move, the weaker the pump gets. The weaker the pump, the more your legs ache and the heavier they feel, which makes moving less appealing. And round it goes, quietly, day after day, with no alarm bell anywhere. A great many people are somewhere in that spiral without having noticed they entered it. Now the good news, and I'm genuinely glad to say this part, improving this does not require walking further. It requires a handful of specific movements designed to switch that pump on properly. I'm going to give you 5, counting down from 5 to 1. The one I've put last is the most effective of them, and it will make far more sense once you've heard the other 4. But before a single one of them, something I would say to you in my exam room, and I'd like you to hear it before you get out of your chair. Do not start these, and see your doctor first, if any of the following apply. If one leg has become swollen recently and it's painful, warm, or red. One leg, not both. That combination can mean a blood clot in a deep vein, and vigorous calf exercise is exactly the wrong response to it. That needs looking at promptly, not exercising. If you've had recent surgery, or a long period of bed rest, or a recent long journey, and one leg has changed. If you've ever been told you have a clot in your leg, or you take a blood thinner for one. If you have a wound or an ulcer on your foot or ankle that isn't healing. If you have significant heart failure, or your doctor has given you specific limits on activity. None of that means these movements are dangerous. For most people, they're about as gentle as movement gets. But the whole point of a calf pump is to move blood, and there are a small number of situations where you want that assessed before you start pushing. Number 5, the ankle pump. It sounds too simple, doesn't it? Which is precisely why people wave it away. But here's what I'd like you to know. This is the very first movement doctors ask patients to do after leg surgery or a joint replacement, often before they're allowed to stand up at all. And the reason is simple. It keeps blood from pooling in someone who has to stay still. Here's how it works. When you pull your toes up toward your shin and then press them down, the calf muscle contracts and relaxes in rhythm. That squeeze presses on the veins in your lower leg and moves the pooled blood upward. No standing, no walking. Sitting exactly where you are, and the pump is running. Research in older adults supports what surgical teams already knew from practice. This simple ankle movement improves the return of blood from the legs and reduces swelling without needing to stand or walk anywhere. How to do it. Sit in a chair with both feet flat on the floor. Lift your toes up toward your shin while your heels stay down. Then reverse it. Press your toes into the floor and lift your heels slightly, as though you were easing down on a car pedal. Slow, controlled. Up and down is 1 repetition. A common starting point is 20 to 30 repetitions, 2 or 3 times a day. There's nothing magic about those numbers. Do what's comfortable. When? While the television is on, while the coffee brews, with the newspaper in the morning, in the waiting room at an appointment, on a long drive, whenever you're a passenger. Add up how many hours a day you sit still. Every one of those hours, the pump is off. This switches it back on at no cost without leaving your chair. But the ankle pump only reaches the lower leg. The next one goes up to the thigh, where a great deal of strength is quietly lost. Number 4. The seated leg raise. Don't let the word seated fool you into thinking this one's easy. About 10 seconds in, your leg will tell you the truth. When you straighten your leg out in front of you and hold it there, the muscles at the front of the thigh and around the hip all have to contract at once. These are the muscles you use to stand up out of a chair, to climb stairs, to keep your balance on a slippery floor, to step up onto a bus. When they contract, they press on the large veins running through the thigh and help push blood out of the leg. Ordinary walking doesn't challenge them in the way you might assume, and thigh strength fades more quietly than most people expect. There's something in the medicine of aging worth knowing here. Doctors pay close attention to something called gait speed, simply how fast you walk. It sounds trivial. It is one of the better predictors of fall risk and of how long someone keeps living independently. And when walking speed starts to slow, it is often the earliest sign that strength is going. Thigh strength is a large part of what protects it. How to do it. Sit upright in a sturdy chair with your back against the backrest and both feet flat. Slowly raise one leg out in front of you, straightening the knee as far as is comfortable. Hold for 2 seconds. Lower it slowly. Don't let the foot drop. That's 1. A common starting point is 10 to 15 on each leg. One thing that matters: keep your back against the chair. If you lean back to swing the leg up, the thigh muscles aren't doing the work, and you lose most of the benefit. Once this feels easy, and I mean after several weeks, not several days, you can add a light ankle weight, the sort that straps on. 1 or 2 pounds is enough to make a real difference. Muscle responds to light, regular loading at any age, and older adults often improve faster than they expect, simply because there's more room to improve. If you have significant knee trouble, check with your doctor before adding weight. That covers the thigh, but there's one more thing at stake that neither of those movements addresses: balance. Number 3, the supported heel raise. This one does 2 things at once. It drives circulation and it trains balance. And balance, I'll say this plainly, is the quiet thing that decides how long you stay independent. Guidance on healthy aging is consistent on this point. Keeping the lower leg muscles strong is one of the most effective things you can do to hold on to your mobility as you get older. Being able to get up from the sofa yourself, climb stairs without both hands on the rail, get to the bathroom at night without waking someone. The calf sits at the center of all of it. Each contraction squeezes the deep veins and pushes blood upward. A weak calf means blood pools, swelling increases, and your balance reactions slow down. A small trip on a rug or a step you misjudged can become an actual fall. 1 second you're fine, and the next you're on the floor. How to do it. Stand behind a sturdy chair or rest your hands lightly on a kitchen counter, feet about hip-width apart. Slowly lift your heels and come up onto the front of your feet, as high as is comfortable. Pause at the top for 2 or 3 seconds, eyes looking straight ahead, not down at your feet. Lower slowly, taking about 3 seconds to come all the way down. That's 1. A common starting point is 10, building toward 20 or 25 over weeks. Why slow? The slow tempo and the pause at the top force the calf and your balance system to work together, which is exactly what your body has to do when you catch your foot and need to recover instantly. No jumping, no bouncing, no hard impact on the knees or hips. Many of my patients told me this was the first time in years they had felt genuinely steady on their feet. Not because the muscle grew overnight, but because the nervous system started remembering how to hold you up. Standing on 2 legs, though, is the gentle version. The next one takes one of them away. Number 2, standing on 1 leg. There is a simple test doctors and researchers use. Can you stand on 1 leg unsupported for 10 seconds? Now, I want to handle this carefully because you may have seen alarming headlines about this test, and I don't want you frightened by something that was never meant to frighten you. Here is the honest version. Yes, people who can't hold that position tend, on average, to have worse health outcomes over the following years. But that is an association, not a cause. The people who couldn't do it were older to begin with and were more likely to have other conditions. Balance isn't causing anything. Balance is a readout. It tells you at a glance how your inner ear, your nerves, your eyes, and your muscles are working together. And there's something the headlines left out that I think you should hear. By around age 70, roughly half of people can't hold it for 10 seconds. Half. If you can't, you are in enormous company, and it is not a verdict about your future. What it is useful information, and unusually, it's information you can act on. Balance is one of the most trainable things on this entire list. Why does it help circulation? Because the moment you stand on one leg, every muscle in that leg, calf, ankle, thigh, hip, and the muscles of your trunk contracts at once and stays contracted to hold you there. That sustained contraction is the pump switched on continuously, without interruption. Ordinary walking doesn't do this. With each step, you're on one leg for well under a second before you swap. Holding a stance runs the pump many times longer. And this is where circulation and fall prevention meet. Poor balance makes people wary of walking. Less walking means poorer circulation, more swelling, heavier and more painful legs. Confidence drops, people stay in more, and down the spiral goes again. How to do it, and read this part carefully. Stand beside a wall or a kitchen counter. Rest one hand on it lightly for safety, not gripping. Shift your weight onto one leg and lift the other foot an inch or two off the floor. No need to lift it high. Stand tall, eyes straight ahead. Don't curl your toes to grip the floor. Hold for 20 to 30 seconds if you can, breathing normally. Then swap. 2 rounds each side is plenty to begin with. As it gets easier, let your hand rest more and more lightly until it's just hovering above the counter rather than touching it. And please, if you feel at all unsteady, keep hold. If you're unsure on your feet generally, do this when someone else is at home. There is no rush at all with this one. One thing I want to separate out here, because it often gets lumped in with all this and it doesn't belong. If you feel lightheaded when you stand up from sitting or lying down, that is a different problem. That is usually about blood pressure and how quickly your body adjusts to being upright. It is not a calf pump problem, and these exercises are not the answer to it. It's worth mentioning to your doctor in its own right, particularly if it's new or if it started after a change in your medication. And I'll say what I always say, never stop or adjust a prescription on your own. Number 1, the heel raise with a hold. This is the one I've kept until the end, and once you understand what it's doing inside your leg, I don't think you'll skip it again. On the face of it, it looks like number 3, but there is one small difference that changes everything. The pause and how long you hold it. Here's why that matters. The calf works as a pressure pump. When it contracts, it pushes blood upward, but if it only contracts and releases quickly, the way it does in ordinary walking, the push isn't sustained long enough to move the blood that has settled deepest in the ankle and foot. When you hold at the top for 3 to 5 seconds, keeping that contraction, the pump is squeezed for long enough to move a substantially greater volume of blood upward. This isn't only theory. There's good clinical evidence behind calf exercise for people with poor leg circulation. Structure programs built around calf raises have been shown to improve how far people can walk before pain sets in. No medication, no equipment, which is, I think, quite remarkable for something you can do beside your own kitchen counter. How to do it. Stand behind a chair or at the counter, hands resting on it, feet hip-width apart. Slowly lift your heels and come up onto the front of your feet, as high as is comfortable. Hold at the top for 3 to 5 seconds. Breathe normally, eyes forward. Lower slowly, about 3 seconds all the way down. That's 1. A common starting point is 8 to 10, building toward 15 or 20 over the following weeks. Always controlled, never rushed. The pause is the entire point of this exercise. Everything else about it is ordinary. Don't skip the pause. And because there's no jumping and no impact, this suits most people with arthritis or unsteady balance, provided one hand stays on something solid. Let me tell you about someone, as always, a picture drawn from many patients over many years, but every detail in it happened. She was 68, sharp, busy, entirely independent, lived alone and preferred it, had her neighbors over on a Thursday, had her grandchildren at the weekend, and cooked for all of them. But her feet were cold every evening, even in August. Her ankles swelled by the afternoon. By evening, she couldn't get her usual shoes on, and she had walked the loop around her local park every single morning for years, never missed a day. When she sat down across from me, she wasn't angry, she was tired, and she was puzzled. She said, "Doctor, I've done everything. I don't know what else there is." I believed her completely. The problem was never that she wasn't trying. The problem was that nobody had told her what to try. I asked her to stop counting her steps. Instead, she did those 5 movements each day in order, 12 to 15 minutes in total, spread across the day. The ankle pumps with her morning coffee. The seated leg raises during the evening news. The heel raises at the counter while the coffee brewed. The one-leg stand before bed, and the heel raise with the hold at the end. Now, I'm going to be honest with you about the result, because I never promise more than I can deliver. Her circulation did not return to what it was at 35. Nobody's does, and I would never tell you otherwise. But after several weeks, her ankles were no longer swelling by evening. Her feet were warmer at night, and the thing she said to me, which I still remember, "I'm not worried about falling when I get up anymore." I asked how long she'd been worried about that. She said, "A long time. I just didn't want to say. I didn't want the children fussing." That steadiness coming back, that was the whole of it. Let me pull the 5 together. 5, the ankle pump. Switches the calf pump on while you're sitting, no standing needed. Fast, simple, do it anywhere. 4, the seated leg raise. Moves blood through the thigh and protects the strength that keeps you upright. 3, the supported heel raise. Circulation and balance together, no equipment, no space needed. 2, the one-leg stand. Runs the pump continuously and retrains your nervous system to react faster when you stumble. 1, the heel raise with a hold. The strongest of the 5, moves the most blood. The pause at the top is the only difference, and it's the difference that matters. Some questions worth taking with you to your next appointment. Is this swelling coming from my veins, or should we be looking at my arteries? Should I have an ankle brachial index test? Are compression stockings right for me, or would they be the wrong thing in my case? And do any of my medications contribute to swelling in my legs? That last one is worth asking. Several common medications can cause ankle swelling as a side effect. That's a conversation, not something to act on alone. Never stop or adjust a prescription by yourself. And some things that should not wait for an appointment. One leg suddenly swollen, painful, warm, or red, particularly after surgery, illness, or a long journey. That's the same day. Sudden severe pain in one leg with no obvious cause. Or a leg that turns pale, cold, and numb over a matter of hours. That is an emergency. Hospital, not an appointment. A wound on your foot or ankle that hasn't healed in a few weeks, however small it looks, especially if you have diabetes. And leg pain that now comes on at rest or wakes you at night. That is a change worth acting on. These are not the situation this video is about. This video is about the slow, chronic kind that people live alongside for years. These are different, and they need attention promptly. Keep walking. I would never ask you to stop. Walking is good for you, and I want you to hold on to the habit. But walking leaves a real gap in what your legs need. And these 5 movements fill it. Under 15 minutes a day, no cost, no equipment, in front of the television, at the kitchen counter, on the porch, or in the chair you already sit in every morning. Circulation is one of the few things that genuinely responds to what you do day after day at any age. This is how you do it. Look after yourself. And remember, this is general education, not personal medical advice. Always talk to your own doctor about your specific situation. I'm Dr. Hale. Take care, and I'll see you next time.